Welcome to the Depth Dive. Today, we are strapping in for a high-speed look at the federal bureaucracy. We're focusing on one of the, really significant changes to the civil service in recent years, Executive Order 14171.
Yeah, this order, it was signed back on January 2025. The title is Restoring Accountability to Policy Influencing Positions Within the Federal Workforce. And look, this isn't just some routine administrative thing. It really fundamentally redefines job security for, thousands of employees.
The ones considered crucial for policy implementation.
Exactly. And is officially published in the Federal Register just a few days after signing.
So our mission today, it's pretty clear. We want to give you the shortcut. We need to cut through the legal jargon, the back and forth with reinstatements, revocations, name changes.
Like that maneuvering.
Right. To explain what this actually means in practice. What's the constitutional justification the administration is using? And how is this regulatory chess game going to impact day-to-day government operations?
It's really important to see this not as just like a standalone policy. It's more the latest round in a struggle that's been going on for years over who really controls the federal workforce. Let's maybe dive into the core argument first, why behind it.
Okay, sounds good. Let's unpack this, starting with the big picture justification. The constitutional authority. Section 1, the purpose section, it bases this entire action on Article 2 of the Constitution. The EO claims that because Article 2 vests the executive power solely in the president, then the president must have, quote, sole and exclusive authority over the executive branch, and therefore the power to manage the federal workforce.
That's the foundation they're laying. It's this assertion that the president needs, basically unfettered managerial control to make sure federal law is executed efficiently and faithfully. If we look back historically, the whole idea of a non-partisan professional civil service since the Pendleton Act in 1883 was designed to stop the old patronage system.
Right, the spoils system.
Exactly. But this EO argues the pendulum has swung too far the other way, towards too much protectionism for employees.
And the administrative issues cited in the order, those are the data points they're using to justify swinging it back. The order explicitly says accountability is sorely lacking, and they use these specific metrics about supervisor confidence and discipline.
They do, and those numbers, they're pretty jarring when you see them. The EO points out that only 41% of civil service supervisors feel confident they can actually remove an employee for serious things like insubordination or misconduct.
That low confidence figure right there, that's framed as a systemic failure. But the number gets even lower when it's about performance, doesn't it?
Oh, significantly lower. The figure they cite for supervisors confident they can remove someone specifically for poor performance is just 26%. And the argument goes, when supervisors feel that constrained, then the president's authority to execute policy is fundamentally compromised. That becomes the operational justification for making a structural change.
Okay, so if that's the operational critique, who's the actual target here? Because the EO is very selective. It focuses specifically on policy influencing positions. These aren't just rank and file folks. These are personnel entrusted to shape and implement actions that, significantly impact all Americans.
Yeah, we're talking about highly skilled people here, often very specialized employees, lawyers, economists, regulatory experts, the ones who actually write the rules, interpret the laws, and shepherd complex policies through the government machinery. The EO essentially argues that the power they wield comes directly from the president's constitutional authority.
And here's where that ideological tension, the one that's been simmering for years, really boils over. The EO specifically calls out the problem as, and I'm quoting here, the numerous and well-documented cases of career federal employees resisting and undermining the policies and directives of their executive leadership recently.
Right. That language frames this whole action as, like, necessary self-defense against internal bureaucratic opposition. It targets roles with a, quote, confidential, policy-determining, policy-making, or policy-advocating character. Basically, if your job involves translating political vision into regulatory reality, you are now square in the sights of this accountability push.
So with that rationale laid out, let's look under the hood. Let's see exactly which legal levers were pulled to make this change happen. EO 144171 works by reversing previous policy, creating that bureaucratic tug-of-war we mentioned earlier.
Yes, and this is the really critical mechanism to understand. The structure of federal employment is broadly split into two main tracks. The competitive service and the accepted service.
Right.
The competitive service, what most people think of merit-based hiring, strong due process rights, pretty high job security. The accepted service, well, by definition, it falls outside those competitive rules. And generally, it has fewer job projections, which often means termination is easier.
Okay, that context is vital. So now let's jump into the actual actions in this EO. Section 2 is the really big move. It immediately reinstates Executive Order 13957 from October 21, 2020. That was the order that originally created something called Schedule F in the accepted service.
Correct. Schedule F was designed specifically to make it much easier to move these policymaking roles out of the protected competitive service and into the accepted service, which, as we just said, significantly reduces their termination protections. It was seen as a fast way to potentially swap out career experts for maybe more politically aligned implementers.
But then that order, EO 13957, it was revoked by the next administration. That happened via Executive Order 14003 in January 2021. So this new order, EO 13171, detailed in Section 6, explicitly revokes that protectionist order, EO 14003, the one titled Protecting the Federal Workforce.
It's a very clean reversal, basically a one-for-one swap. It puts the civil service framework right back to where it was in late 2020. You can really see the ongoing policy battle here. One administration prioritized policy responsiveness by making removals easier with Schedule F.
And the next prioritized stability and nonpartisanship by revoking it.
Exactly. And this new EO brings the responsiveness model right back into force.
And revoking EO 14003 isn't just symbolic. It also forces agencies to immediately review and rescind any actions they took under that 2021 order related to discipline and performance policies. That feels like a pretty aggressive move to just wipe the slate clean across the entire executive branch.
Oh, it's a clear message that the enforcement mechanisms of that protective order are now invalid. But there's another layer of regulatory sort of preemption here, too. You see that in Section 4, which is directed squarely at the Director of OPM, the Office of Personnel Management.
Right, OPM. And what are they told to do?
OPM is told they must promptly rescind regulatory changes that were made by a final rule issued in April 2024, the one called Upholding Civil Service Protections and Merit System Principles.
Ah, that April 2024 rule. I remember that.
Yeah, that rule was a pretty significant effort by OPM to try and solidify job security protections. It specifically said that any position moved from competitive to accepted service must still follow the same strict competitive examining procedures. That essentially blocked the use of a mechanism like Schedule F to quickly strip protections. So by telling OPM to rescind that rule, EO 14171 is basically neutralizing the key defensive measure that was put in place to stop this kind of overhaul.
Wait, so they didn't just repeal the previous EO, they essentially blocked any future regulations that might try to stop them. That's aggressive bureaucratic planning. The order even says that before the official rescissions are done, those specific regulations are considered inoperative and without effect.
It ensures immediate functionality. They're clearing the path of any legal hurdles that might slow down the process of redesignating these policy-influencing roles. The clear intent is rapid, broad implementation.
Okay, let's shift then to the future structure this creates, which is detailed in Section 3. We keep mentioning Schedule F, but EO 14171 actually introduces a bit of a marketing upgrade, doesn't it? It replaces the letter F with the words policy career when referring to this new accepted service schedule.
Yeah, the change in branding is interesting.
Yeah.
Schedule F sounded purely functional, maybe a little stark, even punitive. Schedule policy career.
Yeah.
Well, it tries to reframe it. It emphasizes the importance of the work policy while still keeping the word career, maybe to soften the blow of the reduced job security. It feels like a strategic terminology choice.
And how are these positions actually identified? Section 5 directs the OPM director to issue guidance within 30 days about other categories agencies should recommend for this new schedule.
All right, the initial guidance is meant to sort of streamline things for the agencies. But the real power stays central. Section 3 mandates that the OPM director must promptly recommend to the president which position should be placed in schedule policy career. So the president holds the final ultimate decision on who gets moved out of the competitive service and into this new policy career category.
That centralization of placement authority is really what makes this order so potent. It gives the executive branch enormous power to shape the bureaucracy according to its agenda. But what does this mean for the actual person in one of these new schedule policy career jobs? This is where that critical accountability language comes into play.
Section 3 is really the core of it. It tries to walk this very fine line between demanding loyalty and maintaining political neutrality. The first part is designed to address the fear that this is just a political purge. It explicitly states the employee is not required to personally or politically support the current president or administration policies.
Okay, that sounds like an important protection for nonpartisanship. But the requirement that comes right after it seems to create a huge point of tension, right?
It absolutely does. The requirement is that they are required to faithfully implement administration policies to the best of their ability, consistent with their constitutional oath and the vesting of executive authority solely in the president. And then comes the clear warning: failure to do so is grounds for dismissal.
Okay, let's translate that for the listener. The ISO says you don't have to agree with the policies, but if you don't execute those specific policies, say a new environmental red or a defense contract rule or a trade deal with full, faithful effort, you can be fired pretty quickly.
That definitely creates a very blurry line between nonpartisan job performance and political alignment. I mean, think about it. If an employee gives expert advice that conflicts with a policy directive, or maybe they slow walk a regulation they genuinely believe is legally flawed or harmful based on their expertise, does that now count as failure to faithfully implement? The threshold for dismissal is now much lower, and it's much more easily tied to policy outcomes the current executive wants.
And this focus on fidelity to policy, it goes beyond just the individual contributors, too. Section 3 also specifies that roles supervising employees in scheduled policy career are also suitable for inclusion. So managerial policy roles are also subject to this reduced job security.
Yes. And finally, let's talk about that reduced security itself. Since they're in the accepted service, they lose many competitive service protections. However, Section 3 does amend the previous order slightly. It includes language applying the adverse action procedures of the competitive service.
That sounds like they still get due process. What does that actually mean in practice when you're in the accepted service under this setup?
Well, it means they still have the right to things like a notice of removal, a chance to respond, and potentially appeal to the Merit Systems Protection Board, the MSPB. That's the traditional adverse action process. But the underlying legal burden of proof for the agency is much, much easier to meet when firing an accepted employee compared to a competitive service one. The agency doesn't need to prove specific competitive service violations. They only need to show that the removal serves the efficiency of the service.
So they have the procedure of due process, but the actual substance of the job protection is significantly weakened because their main duty is now defined as faithful policy implementation. And if the administration decides that implementation isn't happening, the adverse action process will likely just move much faster, and the agency is much more likely to win.
Exactly. You've got it. The order seems meticulously crafted to ensure the appearance of fairness, while really maximizing the executive's power to remove people perceived as policy roadblocks.
So wrapping this up, what does this all really mean for you, the listener? Executive Order 14171 is the mechanism that formalizes a major shift. It moves these key policy-influencing jobs into a new category that emphasizes direct, prompt accountability to the elected executive branch, moving away from the traditional institutional protections of the competitive service.
And this deep dive really highlights that fundamental constitutional tension in the modern bureaucracy, doesn't it? The administration is acting on the principle that effective government needs the president's policies executed without obstruction. They argue this accountability is just essential for the executive to function properly.
But then on the other side, you have that historical principle that a nonpartisan, professional, politically neutral civil service protected by merit principles is crucial for government stability and continuity.
Absolutely. And the provocative thought this kind of leaves us with is this: if the core structure of the policymaking workforce becomes highly responsive to every new administration, what's the cost? Does that gain in responsiveness outweigh the potential loss of long-term institutional knowledge, or independent expert advice, or even political stability when the government flukes leadership every 4 or 8 years? That tension, that pull between political will and professional expertise, it's now officially written into the very structure of the federal government.